everyone. Welcome to Zannen, Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. So in this episode, we're doing another retrospective. This is a podcast that explores the connections between anime and Canadian media. And while we usually do retrospectives on, things that aired on TV or had some other kind of relevance, or are anime, we're actually looking at something that is very much not anime, but is very, very Canadian. We are looking at G-Saviour, which this sucks. This movie sucks, but it is so very Canadian. It has lots of important Canadian connections that I think might not be readily obvious to everyone, and I think maybe not everyone is willing to explore in depth. I think we're certainly giving it more attention than it deserves, but this is something I really wanted to talk about for a while on the show, and joining me again is Randy Forbister. Randy, welcome back to the show.
Boy, howdy, is this movie boring as hell.
Randy, you do a panel at some conventions on live-action anime adaptations, right? You're pretty well versed in the subject.
Yes. I usually end up going towards the Japanese side of the live-action movies because they're a little crazier, a little weirder. But I've definitely watched this one a few times now.
And where does it fall in the grand scheme of things? Where would you place G-Saviour among the live-action Devilmans and whatnot?
Oh boy, this does not even reach the levels of Devilman. Not even close. Devilman will tear your soul out and stomp it.
Yep. And
just leave it there for 2 hours. This one it kind of just feels harmless and boring. I think in the grand scheme of anime to live action adaptations.
It is boring and filled with ill-advised creative decisions, seems very disconnected from the source material that it's adapting. If you're not familiar with G-Saviour, it is a live-action Gundam movie. It was made as part of the Big Bang project for the franchise's 20th anniversary, back at the end of the 90s, around 1999. And Sunrise and Bandai, they just pretend that this doesn't exist. I am, honestly, looking back, kind of surprised that they even bothered putting it out on DVD here, given how poorly it was received and how bad they knew it was when it came out. But it did air on TV Asahi in Japan in 2000, very end of 2000, December 29th. And it had a good time slot too. I mean, they weren't hiding it. It aired in like 5 or 6 p.m. And while it is called a TV movie, it actually made its premiere at the Okinawan American Short Film Festival, June 1999, quite a bit before that. So, I don't know. I think this might have actually, the original intention, I think might have actually been for this to be seen in theaters, which is crazy. This is not theatrical material.
No.
But it's definitely a project where I think expectations kept sinking lower and lower. So that kind of makes sense. And of course, the movie famously was shot in Vancouver. It includes many major Metro Vancouver landmarks that if you live here, you're going to immediately recognize, or if you watch a lot of things that have been filmed in Vancouver, you will definitely recognize. And if you're one of those people, you'll probably get a little more enjoyment out of, especially the second half of this film. That's certainly the case for me. I get a real kick out of seeing Simon Fraser University and the Orpheum Theater showing up and being used the way that they're used, the insane way that they're used in the later part of this movie. And this movie definitely has a reputation among the SFU anime club. Every few years someone rediscovers it, and they're just like, oh my god, there's a Gundam battle going on at SFU. Even though they never say the word Gundam in this movie once, it is definitely weirdly trying to distance itself from its source material.
Yeah, that's one of the things I found odd about it, is like if you're making this like big anniversary project and this is like a live action movie is not like a small undertaking, and then to just like not even mention any kind of Gundam, barely mention, like I think the closest like regular terminology we get is just like the sides.
Yeah, they that's the biggest connection there is to the franchise, is that they live in space colonies and they're called sides, and they look basically like the space colonies in Gundam, and that's pretty much where the comparisons end. It doesn't have any of the it doesn't reference anything that has any kind of connection to the history of the franchise, even though it's set in the Universal Century, which is the main timeline for Gundam. It doesn't have any of the common themes like the meaning of war. I guess it delves into like war trauma a little bit, but not in any way that makes me think of Gundam. That's for sure.
It does go into like Gundam storytelling tropes a little more. Like the theme's not there at all, but even though it came out like 2 years before, so much of this reminded me of Gundam Seed.
I know, that's what I thought too. In fact, there's a few things that pop up. I'm just like, did this idea come from the same meeting that they came up with ideas for Seed, or they came up with plot elements for Seed from? Because I was kind of feeling that in there. I mean, it's all obviously very, very lost by the time it, becomes what it became.
Yeah, but like, just to go into it a little, the character of Mimi is really like a proto-Flay.
I was going to say the entire
time.
Thing.
Like, that's all I could think about.
Yeah. And I have a few things to say about Mimi when we go on later. The real star of this movie. Yeah, but as far as Canadian movies connected to anime go, I'm not sure if this is the most Canadian or the Crying Freeman movie is the most Canadian. I guess I got to do an episode on that one too. I actually didn't think of that before. But we're gonna talk about G-Saviour today, and I think with that weird disconnection from Gundam, I think what's most interesting is not so much the connection to Gundam, or rather its relevance doesn't lie so much in its connection to Gundam, but its connection to other Canadian television movie productions. There's a lot of overlap in this, along with shows like Stargate SG-1 and the Battlestar Galactica remake from 2003, 2004, and throughout the 2000s. But more recently, we're seeing a significant overlap apparent between G-Saviour and Hallmark direct-to-TV movies. The people who worked on this, like pretty much all of the major names, almost all of them that's what they're doing now. That's where the money is in Vancouver production right now. It's
very similar to Winnipeg too.
Oh yeah,
big time. Yeah,
they film that stuff like pretty close to where I live, over in Maple Ridge, and I know they do a lot of that over in Winnipeg as well. It's that's where everything's moving right now, and it's kind of funny to see all this stuff reconverging, where it all came together with G-Saviour before. But yeah, let's to start. Why don't we kind of get into our own background with G-Saviour? I don't know if you have that much to say about it, but when did you first see this movie, Randy?
I think I first saw it probably 10 years ago, when I first was investigating Gundam a little more. I was like, oh, there's this crazy live action movie. And I was like, well, finally one day I just decided to sit down and watch it with a group of friends. And very quickly it just became like, it was just so hard to watch because nothing really happens. It's not insultingly bad. And the stuff that's fun to make fun of kind of gets old pretty quickly. But so we ended up sitting through it anyway. And I was just kind of just enamored with this little weird production. I ended up, one of my holy grail purchases when I went to Japan in 2019 was a G-Saviour model kit that I ended up getting.
I hear it's a really impressive model kit.
It is a good kit. It's still unbuilt. I was going to build it for this podcast, but I had some health issues that didn't let me sit down for a long period of time. But I'm going to be building that as soon as I can.
Yeah, I mean, the G-Saviour, it is a good design. Kunio Okawara, who designed the original Gundam, he did the mech designs for this movie and its spin-offs. There are multiple spin-offs for G-Saviour. This was supposed to be a big deal. We look at it now and we think, oh, they just crapped this thing out because they wanted to. But I think there were definitely large ambitions behind this whole thing that ended catastrophically, to say the least. And part of that was this really high. Was it a perfect grade model or
just a high grade?
High grade, yeah.
Yeah, just a high grade.
Yeah, but it's a really well designed model with a really well designed mobile suit, and yeah, it's just so weird that such lavish treatment was given to arguably one of the worst things connected to this franchise by far. G-Saviour, for myself, obviously when I first was discovering Gundam, like a little after the time that Gundam Wing aired, I heard murmurs online about it as this new terrible Gundam thing that had emerged. And nobody seemed to, again, the ongoing theme with G-Saviour is nobody wants to talk about it. So I'm just like, okay, I guess nobody wants to talk about it. Let's just leave it at that then. The first time I actually saw footage of the film was a couple of years later, in either 2002 or 2003, either the first or second Anime Evolution convention in Burnaby or Metro Vancouver. That convention was held at Simon Fraser University, and at the closing ceremony, they made sure to play a clip of one of the final battles in the film, which was, quote unquote, filmed at the university. I think more accurately, they used the university as the basis for the CGI animation. None of this film is shot outside. Everything is on a soundstage or in an indoor, or some kind of indoor setting. But they used Simon Fraser University because it's so weird and quasi-futuristic looking to stage this mobile suit battle at the end of the movie. And if I wound up going to Simon Fraser University, that's where I went to school, and I still think it's just wild and crazy to see that happening. And of course, even if you've never been to SFU, you've seen it in Battlestar Galactica and Stargate. It is used so frequently. It is abused as a filming location in both of those shows and in many other things. It's so recognizable just because of that. And that kind of stuck with me. It was quite, I don't even remember when I first actually sat down and watched the movie. I think it was probably many, many years later, probably 7 or 8 years later. And, I found at the time that it wasn't worth sitting through the whole thing just to get to that SFU stuff. But, it hits me hard, I gotta say. And also, I had completely forgotten that the G-Saviour is unveiled on the stage of the Orpheum Theater halfway through the movie, which is that is so unbelievably stupid. Even if you've never been to the Orpheum Theater before, like, you can tell that this filming location is being improperly used for this type of scene. It's just, like, the location scouting was like zero effort into anything. I really want to say that G-Saviour was a movie that our tax dollars paid for, but I think that might actually not be true. Because one thing that surprised me the most when I was watching the credits for this film, there didn't seem to be any indication that any tax credits were used in its production. And that may be the most inept part of this film, is that this project where everything is just constantly deferred to the lowest bidder, where everything is, obviously moved to Vancouver just to keep costs as low as possible. They didn't even try to get the tax credits, which they certainly would have qualified for.
Yeah.
What the hell was this company thinking? How incompetent can you get? That's the most obvious thing, and they didn't even do that for this movie. They could have cut their costs even more. Yeah, I don't even know how to comment on that further. That really surprised me.
Probably something with like Japanese committees and stuff. They probably wouldn't want to cover the tax credits. That's just what I'd assume, because I know like Japanese companies, when they're filming or creating things, are like very precious about lots of it. So I figure that must have something to do with something.
Yeah. Well, the problem is it's not really clear how much of this was Sunrise and Bandai and how much of it was the company that they partnered with for its production, which is called Polestar Entertainment. That is a company we don't know a whole lot about, which is one theme I found when researching this movie and just seeing what other people have said about it in the past. And again, the recurring theme, no one ever wants to talk about G-Saviour. Because of that, there are like no interviews or in-depth overviews of its production. Yoshiyuki Tomino commented on it once, and I think he just basically dismissed it. And the stance seemed to be that, yeah, it's canon because it's in the Universal Century, but it's set like 200 years out from any other canonical event in there so far that it can be easily disregarded and ignored completely. But you don't see anyone really talking about this very much. So I wanted to try and clarify as much as I could about the background of this film. And, it is possible that maybe Sunrise or Bandai, they were too proud to apply for tax credits, or maybe it's just not something they wanted to do, or they were just ignorant of it, or it could just be the incompetence of Polestar Entertainment, the company who they partnered with. I think tracing G-Saviour's story back, usually, again, we only go back to a few years before it was produced a lot of the time, but I think it's also important to keep in mind that Sunrise, since almost the beginning of the franchise, they have had aspirations to produce a live-action Gundam film, going all the way back to even before Zeta Gundam came out, back to the early 80s. You've read Tom Winicki's article on when Gundam came to Hollywood?
Yeah, I've read bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, so that's a really great blog article overviewing sort of a concept and pitch that was developed for a live-action Gundam film back, I think, in 1981 or 1982. So this was shortly after Gundam was canceled on Japanese TV, and then started to gain more notoriety in the reruns. More than notoriety, it became a smash hit in the reruns. And I think a big problem with Sunrise and Bandai's approach to releasing Gundam internationally, or at least in Western countries, was their ambitions were always too high. And that kind of makes sense when you realize, like, oh, they didn't want to release the cartoon here, but they did want to look into getting a movie made. And not just a movie. They wanted to have CGI be used to create the mobile suits, even all the way back then when it was very much in its infancy in films. And like the idea of doing a mech battle or animating mechas, it was just not something that could have been done then. It was like, it's even competent attempts throughout the 90s didn't look very good, even if
like there's no way to make 90s CG look good. And like as I think film history has proven, those like CG efforts have only gotten worse and worse in retrospect from like the 90s and like even some of the stuff in the 80s. Like none of that stuff really holds up well unless like the only thing I can think of that kind of looks okay is like the Beauty and the Beast sequence, and that's an animated movie. That's not even like a live action movie.
Yeah. Well, you look at movies like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. The CGI holds up pretty well in that, but it's because it's used so sparingly. And it's not used for something that's the center of attention constantly.
Yeah.
Even with the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, it's only some shots that are done that way.
That's true.
And it's obscured a lot of the time.
Yeah. My mind, me being who I am, my mind goes to Power Rangers and the Power Ranger movie, and what a travesty the final Megazord battle is in that with the CG.
It's awful.
It's completely horrendous. Because they tried that weird chrome filter on like all of the suits and everything, and it just I don't think I've seen something that looks worse. As far as like a professionally produced film like that. Like even G-Saviour looks better than that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
To whatever it can look.
Yeah. I mean the CGI work, which, isn't great, it was like the central thing at the pitch of this movie from the beginning. Also, just on the note of doing mecha in anime, I did want to highlight the film Robot Jocks, which was done in the early 90s. But it was all done in stop motion, like kind of when stop motion was at its peak. If you've ever seen that movie or never seen that movie, I recommend checking it out. They used to play it on Space all the time. But it really shows you what the better approach to doing mech or like a mech live action at that point would have been. Like the idea of trying to do that in CGI was just not something that would be considered. But I think obviously Sunrise's aspirations to create that live action film in the 80s went nowhere. And we don't really know what happened after that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that this idea did not go off the table. I think certain producers at Sunrise and Bandai, or Sunrise and then in the 90s Bandai, when Bandai purchased Sunrise, I think some people wanted this to happen. With G-Saviour, its production can be traced back to 1995, and at that time an all CGI promotional trailer was commissioned to sell this idea to Sunrise execs. So this CGI, you can't see it anywhere. It is lost media. It is nowhere. You can find screenshots and descriptions of what happens in this trailer, but the footage is not available. And it's also completely different from the final film, both in terms of production and plot. I don't think it had any connection to the companies that did the CGI work in the final film or anyone who did no connection to Vancouver, no connection to Polestar or anything. And apparently had a budget of about 200 million yen, which is like 350,000 Canadian in mid-90s money. And to what degree this was supposed to be shown to the public, I'm not so sure. Apparently it was shown at one event in 1997. I wasn't able to confirm which one. But you could watch it on an airplane. It was made available on JAL flights to Honolulu, of all things, probably just as like filler material to put on their entertainment system. But obviously there was at Sunrise some kind of big push going on to get this CGI-centered live-action project off the ground. But again, all we have of it now are screenshots that were apparently published in a magazine in the 90s. It's, again, not very clear where things went from there or who or what particular people at Sunrise were even pushing this. But eventually it became part of the Big Bang project for Gundam's 20th anniversary. And that next step, obviously, you're going to make this movie. Where are you going to take it to? Well, they went to Polestar Entertainment, and we don't really know very much about this company. One misconception that I see coming up a lot is that Polestar was a Canadian company. They are not. They were based in Beverly Hills. They also no longer exist. I don't think I need to point that out, but this company is gone, and they barely existed to begin with. So I think that this kind of came together at that level with Polestar as like an attempt to try and get a Hollywood company to pick this up. And eventually probably didn't reach anyone they wanted to, and like the people who at Polestar were probably the only ones who wanted to take on the project, and just again, everything just kind of going to the lowest bidder. So Polestar Entertainment, I was able to dig up their old website on archive.org on the Wayback Machine.
Okay.
There's not a lot to see there. So there are only 3 productions listed on Polestar Entertainment's website. G-Saviour, a television adaptation of Turn of the Screw, which I can't. Of course, that was the poem that became the basis of The Haunting of Bly Manor, which just came out on Netflix. A year or two ago. But I searched and searched. I could not find any evidence that this production went anywhere or even was in any serious development phase. All I could find is the one mention of it on this website. So the other thing listed on there was a horror movie called Hobbs End. And in fact, interestingly, the website for Polestar Entertainment was actually hobbsend.com.
Oh.
So Hobbs End was obviously at the center of what this company was trying to do. The film itself wound up being a direct-to-video horror film that came out in 2002, which is quite a bit longer, quite a while after this website would have been created in 1999, early 2000. So, the impression I get is that this production company was made to make this movie, and that G-Saviour was something that they just kind of took on in that whole process. But again, not a lot of info, can't really verify that. It's hard to tell. I can say that Hobbs End did get released, VHS, and I think it got a DVD release as well. You can probably find it around if you look hard enough. But all I could find is there was a single dailies clip of it on YouTube. I couldn't even find a proper trailer or anything. And I did find some reviews, and they were all very, very bad.
Yeah, I'm looking at the IMDb page right now,
yeah.
And the first review is thought it would never end.
But interesting credits in this movie, Hobbs End. So we see 2 of the stars of G-Saviour are in Hobbs End. Brennan Elliott, who plays Mark Curran, the main character in G-Saviour. We'll get to him in a bit. And who we already mentioned, Mimi DeVere, played by Caterina Conti in G-Saviour. Caterina Conti is the star of this movie, and interestingly, her only 2 credits anywhere ever are G-Saviour and Hobbs End. We look a little closer at the movie. This movie was made by one of the 2 executive producers on G-Saviour. So there were 2 names who I think they're both involved with Polestar Entertainment. There's Anthony Scala. I can't really find very much about him. But the other guy, Philip David Segal. There's a lot of info about this guy. And I think that he was probably a little more central to the creation of this film than anyone has considered. He has quite a history. He was a director of drama development at Columbia, and then in the mid '80s, and before moving over to ABC Television, he was a programming executive there. He worked on Twin Peaks, 30-something in China Beach. Then, interestingly, he apparently was in talks with the BBC as early as 1989 about Doctor Who. And later on, in the 90s, after Doctor Who was canceled, he apparently was what you would call I don't think it's accurate to call him the showrunner, but he's designated as such on Wikipedia for the 1996 Doctor Who television movie that aired on Fox. I haven't seen that movie. I'm told it's terrible, but it seems that even though he wasn't the director or anything, he was very much the guy who was behind that. He is the designated showrunner. He made that movie happen. And again, also has just executive producer credit on that. Interestingly, his Wikipedia article does mention Hobbs End, and when you click on Hobbs End on there, it just loops back to his Wikipedia article. So that it kind of tells you about that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mention Polestar Entertainment. But I think that he was one of the lead guys behind that company, and I think that he kind of was the one who guided G-Saviour's production. I think he had his hands in this more than any account we've really seen. Apparently he's done work in a lot of reality TV shows since then.
Yeah,
I think Ice Road Truckers he did a few years ago, and just fingers in a lot of stuff. Pretty much typical Hollywood television executive type.
No kidding. I'm looking at this too, and just like his follow-up projects to G-Saviour being Andromeda and Mutant X, I can see those influences in G-Saviour.
Absolutely.
A lot. So that doesn't surprise me that he would be like the guy with the most fingers in the pie here.
Yeah. And I think this is something that I hear brought up a lot, is that, and you can see just by watching the movie, that G-Saviour repurposed the uniforms from the Starship Troopers movie, and they're the uniforms for the consent soldiers in this. So they smuggled a lot of things into this project, but
yeah, those Starship Troopers uniforms, they get around. They've been in Firefly, and they were in a Power Ranger season as well.
Yeah.
For sure, that's for sure.
Repurposed props are a huge part of G-Saviour, both for what they used and what got reused from them. One other name that I found connected to Polestar Entertainment I wanted to highlight, Rod Conti. So you don't see him prominently credited in anything. I think he's an assistant to Philip Segal in the credits for G-Saviour. But when I looked up just a corporate listing for Polestar Entertainment, he is the contact for that company. And Rod Conti, same last name as Katarina Conti, who plays Mimi in this movie. So as far as I can tell, Rod Conti, I think he actually is an executive at Fox Sports now. And he doesn't seem to be married to Katarina. I think they might be relatives. I think there's some.
Okay.
I think that might be a sister or cousin or something. Some kind of nepotism thing going on here for sure, but not enough information about either of those people to really draw any conclusions. But that I found that to be really, really interesting. I don't think we'll ever know exactly how deep this goes, but I guess it's all pretty typical for this kind of production, though. No reason to get conspiratorial about it.
No.
But yeah, so that's the situation with Polestar Entertainment. So again, they were not a Canadian company; they were a Hollywood-based production company. And I think that what ultimately happened here is that G-Saviour being moved to Vancouver was purely just one of many cost-cutting measures, and it just seemed like the project spiraled out of control from there, and just kept getting cut back, and it might have been because they were under the gun to get it out in time for the 20th anniversary in 1999, which they technically didn't, because it only had the one screening. But yeah, I think this, as I said before, high ambitions into this project just kept getting deferred down to, or getting downgraded to very low expectations. And that's just kind of how it probably wound up being the way it was. Yeah.
Like this is definitely the definition of a made for TV sci-fi movie, just like start to finish. Like this is something that I could see running at like 2 a.m. on Space Channel that you just kind of randomly flip on and don't think anything of, and just watch them like just do a by the numbers kind of space story.
that's the other thing. I'm surprised that this never aired on TV outside of Japan either. Like this, you think this would have been perfect schlock to like, again, like you said, run on space at early in the morning or something, or even on daytime TV in the U.S. But it just got the home video release here, and that was it. But at the same time, like considering that Sunrise really doesn't like this project, maybe we're lucky we got that much.
Yeah, no kidding.
One other detail I forgot to mention is that when this aired on Japanese TV, it was dubbed in Japanese as well. I've seen estimates for the final budget for this film ranging between $5 million and $9 million. I would definitely skew towards the lower end of that.
Yeah, again, and I'd have to believe most of that went to the CG.
Absolutely,
as well. Because like as for the sets, like these sets surely weren't made just for G-Saviour.
Absolutely not. These are all repurposed from something else. They are very generic. The props are so cheap looking. They're like any kind of like control room setup or any kind of computers. They're just old monitors with cardboard around them, basically. Food coloring, so much food coloring. You have these lab scenes that have the most the hokiest looking formulas, and then, like during parties they're just drinking water with strange food coloring.
Yeah,
they really weren't putting a lot of thought into any of that stuff. But the thing with the CGI, I mean, it's obviously just doing this in CGI in the 90s wasn't a good idea to begin with. But even when you consider that, man, they really, the mech designs just look so bad. They look so like they've had the life drained out of them. There's no color. They all look just they're all kind of toned down to this light gray. Yeah. And it's just so unpleasant to look at. Yeah. And as we mentioned before, like, mech designs by Kunio Okawara, they were good. Like, these are good looking robots. And you can see that in the model kit. This film had a PS2 game sequel released as well. Again, part of a small mini franchise fueled by large ambitions for G-Saviour. The game obviously is terrible, but the mech designs translate into that game much better than they do into this film.
Yeah. I started watching some of the cutscenes from that game. I ended up not being able to finish, but like all of the dialogue is in English too, which was interesting. Like it's subtitled in Japanese, but like you can hear the voiceover all in English.
Yeah, it looks like I was poking around about that a little bit. I think it was mostly just expats doing those voices, but again, trying to maintain that Western, I guess, Western cinema feel that they were trying to evoke with this franchise in general, which was
it's not good voice acting.
No.
But it is in English. I can objectively say that it is in English.
Yeah. And I guess on the topic of the larger franchise, so that they had, in addition to this video game, there was also a making of documentary that aired at the same time that this film did on TV. I wish I could find that, but that is also lost, or at least it does not seem to be preserved anywhere. I'd love to take a look at that thing and see how they depict the production of this movie, but that seems to be lost media. If anyone knows where that is, please let me know, because I'd really love to see that and see how they spin that for a TV audience. There's also a 3-part novelization of G-Saviour. There's a radio drama prequel that was broadcast on FM radio and released on CD shortly after, which was not uncommon for anime stuff at that time. But I just think it's funny because that prequel clarifies a lot of the plot points that are not communicated at all in this film. And, of course, as we mentioned, one very nice model kit. Possibly a movie dwarfed by its own spin-offs, but the quality of any of this stuff is up for debate at best.
Yeah.
Oh, and also the Japanese broadcast had its own ending theme in Japanese. The title of the song is Orb, another possible Gundam Seed connection.
Yeah.
And that was not included on the Western release at all, though. Before we talk about the film itself, let's take a look at the cast and crew. So this is where we see a lot of the overlap between other productions. The director is Graham Campbell. He is very much an episodic director kind of guy. He's had his hands in lots of stuff like Degrassi, Being Erica, just mostly directing random episodes. Never directs anything for more than a few episodes. I didn't see any credits where he's like story editor or writing longer running plot lines in any particular show. Notably, and I think everyone who has looked into this movie has probably noticed this upon researching this. He is mostly directing Hallmark Christmas movies. In fact, he has one that is all scheduled to come out this year, or he did one just last year. He has more coming out this year. I think that's very much where he's found his niche now. We mentioned Mutant X. He actually also wrote some episodes of Mutant X as well in 2001, similar to Philip Segal. So other interesting overlaps there.
Yeah, like those Hallmark movies, they're profitable for the people who are working on them. Like they're a steady source of income for D-list actors and directors, that's for sure.
So the story and screenplay for this film, there were 2 credited writers. So the first writer is Stephanie Pennessy. This is her only credit in anything ever. She doesn't have any listing in anything else, only G-Saviour. So hard to say who this person is, how much input they actually had on the script. I think they're from Hollywood and not Vancouver, so probably from part of probably did some work based in Polestar specifically. More prominently, the other writer on this film was Mark Amato, also worked on Mutant X as well as Earth Final Conflict. Also, despite the fact that he's based in Hollywood rather than Vancouver, he's also working on Hallmark Christmas movies. He's written a whole bunch of them. No overlap with Graham Campbell or the other actors who were in this film, but he has been pumping them out since 2015.
And let's not forget the classic show Tripping the Rift.
Tripping the Rift, yes, he wrote a whole bunch of that one.
Jeez.
And he worked on Extreme Ghostbusters, Men in Black TV series, so he did some animation writing as well. He wrote one episode of the Harry and the Hendersons TV series. That seems to be his first credit.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely follows the trend of the other creatives we've seen in that. But he seems to be the biggest contributor to the script on this one from what I can see. So where we start to see the real overlaps with things like Battlestar Galactica and Stargate SG-1 is when we get into things like director of photography. Joel Ransom was the director of photography for this movie. He actually shot the Battlestar Galactica miniseries. So not the full series of Battlestar Galactica, but he shot the original pilot. I think it was 4 or 5 episodes that aired in 2003. But so that's a major person who worked on Battlestar Galactica. The art director for G-Saviour was the production designer for Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis, also the movie Night at the Museum, and is most recently the credited as the art director on Arrow as well. And then for assistant art director, we have Doug McLean. He was the art director for Battlestar Galactica and Caprica. So again, we don't have there's no direct overlap between the staffing for these productions, but these people are working together. More of the general production crew, they're probably working on multiple projects. They have workflows. They know how to work together.
Yeah.
Their whole method carries on between Stargate SG-1, between G-Saviour, between Battlestar Galactica, and it's significant that the production designer and art directors for this went on to work in Battlestar Galactica. Because I think a lot of the techniques that were used questionably in G-Saviour were honed much better in Battlestar Galactica. You can see that in the way that cockpits are filmed, in the costume design, just in the general approach. Because Battlestar Galactica was also a super low budget production. I don't think they had that much more to work with than G-Saviour did. But it is a significantly more competent end product overall. Yeah. And I mean, I think a big part of that was just learning how to do this stuff in something like in G-Saviour. I think just a lot of overlap, and not just talent, but also method and just relationships between staff and stuff.
Yeah, because once you're working with the same people doing the same kind of sci-fi sets, you're gonna keep learning and improving on that too. And that's like I assume there's not many people whose specialty is sci-fi set design in Vancouver.
Exactly.
It's probably a pretty small group of people.
Yeah, I mean but a lot of stuff, not so much now, but definitely back then during the late 90s and early 2000s, that just became a niche that was honed in on here. So so it's it's that same crew, those same people just kind of doing their thing. And it's G-Saviour's. It is an important step in that evolution. You can see how it all grew through that. So, like I said at the beginning, G-Saviour, its connections to Gundam are maybe less interesting. I think the place that it sits on among those other Vancouver productions is quite notable. It's obviously that stuff kind of ended with Battlestar Galactica as well. But even then, you look at Battlestar Galactica, that was one of the major shows that ushered in the current the current trend of prestige TV as well. Hard to say how much of that trend kind of translated into sci-fi on TV. Maybe we'll touch on that a bit later. But first, I think we got one other staff member worth highlighting. Maybe the most noteworthy person who worked on this film was actually the composer, John Debney. So he's best known for his Oscar nomination for The Passion of the Christ. He was also nominated for an Annie for The Emperor's New Groove. You look him up, he has done so much. He has a very storied history of composition in film and television. I don't even know where to start. What's his most recent thing? He worked on The Orville, Young Sheldon.
Oh, God.
Sticks out a little more. But yeah, going back, original Hocus Pocus and its sequel. He worked on Liar Liar, Inspector Gadget movie, Spy Kids, Cats and Dogs, Princess Diaries, Jimmy Neutron film, Snow Dogs, Elf, Looney Tunes Back in Action. Again, Passion of the Christ, where he was nominated for an Academy Award. Spider-Man 2 did additional music alongside Danny Elfman. Sin City. He's done so much. And, obviously G-Saviour was just another project. And the music is not that great. I don't think he's necessarily always going to give his best for something like this. But he contributed what was needed for this project, to say the least.
Yeah. Like this, I think this is not a project you do because you love the idea. This is a project you do because you want the money.
Exactly.
And I think that shows in every single aspect of this movie's production.
So let's talk a little about the cast too. So we've already mentioned we already mentioned Brennan Elliott. He plays our very bland hero, Mark Curran. And at that time, he was best known for his recurring role on the Lifetime medical series Strong Medicine. He's had lots of minor roles over the years on shows like The 4400 and Cedar Cove. Most recently, he starred opposite Lacey Chabert in the Crossword Mysteries Hallmark television movies, which are mysteries based in crossword puzzles. And they have made quite a few of those. It's been an ongoing tradition on Hallmark for a while now. And I believe even Brennan Elliott is getting into the Christmas movie thing. He's been in at least one or two of them now. I would expect to see him in more. Mm-hmm. Oh, three or four. I see at least 3 or 4 listed here. So he's been in it for a while, and he's probably going to keep that going for a while longer.
As long as he can.
Notably, he is also one of the very few people who have actually spoken publicly about his work on G-Saviour. He didn't say much. He did mention on Twitter, he said, I have to be honest, it was one of my first jobs ever, so I guess it was an experience of just trying to figure it all out, but it was a fun film. I guess that might indicate that at least the people involved did not have a bad time making this movie, at the very least, so maybe that's a good sign. So Enika Okuma stars as Cynthia Graves, so notably, she is the voice of Lady Un in Gundam Wing. She also played Jade in Shadow Raiders, and most recently Tracy Nash in Rookie Blue, if that's your thing. And then we go back to again, as we mentioned before, Katerina Conti, Mimi DeVere, who is I think the wife of Mark Curran in this. They seem to be married.
If not fiance.
Yeah. They're either married or engaged.
Yeah.
Also a credited producer on the film, going back to the very likely connection she had with Polestar Polestar Entertainment. Yeah, she's a standout in this movie for sure. She's a character you'll remember.
Yes.
And I didn't realize this the first couple times I saw the movie, but looking at how things played out recently, I think she is kind of like a prototype of Flay Ulster. I think that was just sort of a character archetype that found its way into the final version of this film, and also found its way into Gundam Seed, which, if that is the case, raises questions about just the general scripting method of these Gundam projects. But as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, I was going to make the same observation. Yeah, Mimi DeVere. But we also have David Lovegren as Mark's former commanding officer, Jack Hall. He's a Vancouver-based character actor. He has been in countless things, Millennium, The X-Files. If it's been filmed in Vancouver, almost guaranteed that he has been in it at some point. He was also in Cool Runnings in a minor role, and also Antitrust. So again, I'm not going to list all this stuff. He was also in Intelligence, the CBC show from like 2006. So he's again, very familiar face in Vancouver productions. Same goes for Hrothgar Matthews, who played Philippe, who's the leader or the guy they meet up with the Illuminati, who are good guys in this movie. Again, another Vancouver-based actor. You've seen him in a million things. Kenneth Welsh, Wyndham Earle from Twin Peaks, I might add, in the bad episodes of Twin Peaks. He's General Garneau, who is like the villain.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The villain. They sure drive that home in this movie. I mean, he knows what he's doing in that role, for better or worse. And I think he was okay for what was expected of him. Countless low budget movies and TV productions, also in the X-Files. Yeah. Again, basically a character actor, mostly in television productions. And also blink and you miss a cameo from Sam Vincent, who would go on to play Athrun in Gundam Seed. He is the pilot of the escape shuttle that General Garneau is on at the very end. And also as Counselor Graves, Cynthia Graves' father, is Blue Man Kuma, who I think at least listeners of this show will probably most likely recognize as Tigatron in Beast Wars and Gigabyte and Reboot. Countless other live action Vancouver productions. So these are familiar faces to anyone who watches a lot of TV that's been made here. But interestingly, despite that, top billing during the credits of this movie is not given to any of the actors or the director or the writers. It's given to the special effects company, which was not, the special effects were not done in Vancouver. They were done in Hollywood, which again goes back to this idea that I think the CGI element of this movie was supposed to be like the big up front and center feature of it. And yet it's the part that has aged most horribly of all. But again, just kind of centers it back on that idea of the CGI being the most prominent thing. So yeah, as for the movie itself, I guess we got to talk about what this movie's actually about. The problem with all the summaries you see on Wikipedia and stuff for G-Saviour is that they explain the plot in a way that makes it sound like the movie makes sense, but most of this background stuff is never actually explained in the film.
No, like it's just there's a special energy source that could revolutionize the way light works, I guess.
Bioluminescence, which combines light and heat, whatever that means, in a way that could solve basically an ongoing food crisis, food shortage that's happening among that's causing instability in the Earth sphere. And at this point, the political situation has changed considerably since the Universal Century anime that is set here. This is again set in the Universal Century year 0223, a good 200 years out from whatever the furthest point is in the main Gundam timeline. Earth Federation is gone. Space colonies that were under the Federation's control have autonomy, and they have now a bunch of them have formed the Congress of Settlement Nations, which is abbreviated quite questionably as consent. That's made up of a whole bunch of the space colonies or sides, and then you have an opposing force, which are composed of the other ones, and then you have Side 8, which is the settlement of Gaia. That is SFU. SFU is Side 8 and where most of the action at the end of the film goes. They're a neutral colony, and that is where Cynthia Graves is from. She's one of the scientists who have made this breakthrough, discovering bioluminescence, which can potentially solve this food shortage. Earth is covered 3/4 in water, and therefore the potential of this is unlimited, which means I guess they want to turn the oceans of Earth into light, which will create food.
Which will make food.
It is just it is a MacGuffin.
It's a MacGuffin.
It's a MacGuffin in a test tube, orange-colored food coloring with an extremely bright CGI glowing effect added to it in key moments.
So Cynthia and like three others try to sneak onto Mark's ship to steal the prototype back.
Yeah, it's the Hydrogen Lab.
Yeah, okay.
I think they're on Earth at that point doing underwater research.
It must be Earth. Yes.
Yeah, it has to be Earth. I don't think it's explicitly stated, but it has to be Earth.
Because they do. Yeah, because he's way underwater when he saves the pilot in the start. Yes.
Yeah, but and Mark himself, he is a former consent soldier who basically was forced to quit because otherwise he would face a court-martial for not following orders. He was under the command of Jack Hall, who I can't remember what happened. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Who cares?
It doesn't matter.
But
unimportant.
But after Cynthia and sneaks on board to steal the sample, the Hydrogen Lab is taken under control of Consent, who it's not clear what their jurisdiction actually is, but of course Jack is taking control there. He is just a very typical sneering
bad guy, rival guy. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot to write home about with him.
No. So Mark gets curious about the scientist. He goes to see her. He sneaks his way in through clearance. And then she tells him her story, and he instantly believes her, and he decides that he's going to break her out. And as they're breaking out, he meets up with the two interns that were with her at the time, and his fiance also catches them and decides that she wants to come along too. Just because.
Yeah. Highlight of this film was when they were launching off of Earth, heading towards Side 4. And man, the way they shook their faces during that scene, they were really trying hard to sell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they arrive on Side 4, which is the Orpheum Theater. Very bizarre scene that takes place with that bartender they find there. Mm-hmm. I also find it difficult to believe that this sequence was scripted, because I can't imagine how something like this would have been scripted, because he has a gun ready for anyone who doesn't order the right drink.
Oh God, yes. You have to order a specific drink.
You have to order a specific drink to get Philippe, who's with the Illuminati, to come out and meet you. And if you don't order the right drink, he just reaches for his gun instead. Yeah. Apparently, and presumably would shoot her, and she's just like stubbornly insisting on ordering the drink that she wants.
I want a margarita. And she's just not understanding.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Basically, Philippe used to be on the same team as Mark. They want him to come out of retirement to pilot the G-Saviour. And at this point, when they unveil the G-Saviour on the Orpheum, at the Orpheum Theater, which is that's just a green screen at the Orpheum Theater that has the docking bay with the Gundam in it. It hasn't even really been established that what mobile suits are, or that they fight in mobile suits. You get very small glances of it beforehand. Nothing is introduced properly.
No.
And yeah, basically they head to Gaia after, which is the neutral colony. And yeah, I don't even feel it's worth explaining what happens next. Well, let's follow Mimi's storyline.
Yeah. So Mark and Cynthia fall in love.
Yes.
While they're in Gaia.
So convincingly.
Like immediately upon landing, Mimi goes to go take a shower, and Mark and Cynthia go off, and then she kisses him, and then he kisses her back, and Mimi sees all that and decides the best way to get revenge is to do a genocide.
Yep.
Yeah. So like they're trying to establish themselves as a non-violent party, and Mimi just shoots some some of the consent soldiers and starts a war.
Yep. Everything is so laughably forced that takes place in this part. But yeah, basically the General Garneau, who is basically essentially in charge of consent, it turns out that the food shortage is very much being manufactured to allow them, control the colonies, and they want to stop the bioluminescence thing from getting out because creating unlimited food shortage obviously would make it harder for them to do that, and they don't care if they create a war in the process. So we get the Gundam battle that takes place at SFU. We get the showdown between Mark and his former commanding officer, which is laughable. That seems kind of funny. They get really hammy in that part. And Mimi ultimately has after trying to instigate a genocide.
Yeah.
She has a change of heart.
She swaps out the bioluminescence back during like a small scuffle on Gaia. And
she breaks through a ceiling.
Yeah.
And shoves over a child at one point.
Yeah.
That was another scene that really stood out. That's how you know, just in case you weren't sure, that she is supposed to be unlikable at this point in the film.
Yeah. But when she finds out that it's not actually going to help and it's going to get destroyed, she swaps it back out. Then she goes on the space shuttle with the president. While they're in the space shuttle, she tells the president that she swapped it, and the president's like, we got to go back. And the small hesitation going back leads to them being caught in the crossfire, and everyone in the space shuttle dies while Mimi laughs out loud at their misfortune. Yeah. Which, again, is very Gundam Seed.
Very, yeah. Like, that's very reminiscent of what happens to Flay in that series.
Yeah.
Anyway, this movie, I guess this movie's bad. Like, every aspect of the plot is, even if you don't consider it a part of Gundam or even draw comparisons to Gundam, it is extremely uninspired. Really, suspend your disbelief too far. It takes huge liberties in the way it presents anything even remotely scientific. Yeah, it's total crap. You can see why it's not really highly regarded in the Gundam canon. Although it was. Did you watch Gundam Build Fighters?
I did watch Build Fighters, yes.
Yeah, so I think this was the first time in Gundam Build Fighters in 2013 that they actually acknowledged the G-Saviour. And I'm guessing they only acknowledged the mobile suit itself.
Yeah. You know what? I think actually Build Fighters and seeing the G-Saviour there, it ignited a lot of talk online. And I think that's what inspired me to watch it for the first time.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Looking back, I think that's probably why. Yeah.
Exactly what they didn't want, but they took that risk. So yeah, did I even have anything else to say?
I didn't regret watching it the second time. I think watching it the second time made things a lot more clear. And maybe I just focused more because I wasn't like in a party setting.
Yeah. This is a movie you put on in the background on New Year's Eve.
Yeah. It feels like the movie that's on Space when you're homesick for the day. Even though it never actually aired on Space, it feels like it's that movie. Like, it feels like it's completely unimportant, something that would just be thrown on because they have it in their library and they need to fill airtime. It's serviceable on the side of bad, but it looks professional enough to actually be on TV. And no one really cares what it's about, besides the fact that it has a space station and shiny Gundams in the end. I think that's really all they wanted from this movie, and they got it.
We'll never know the full story behind it, in all likelihood. But it is certainly a tragic one. It seems that, some people had a good time working on it. As I kind of alluded to before, Battlestar Galactica built on this in many ways. And I guess maybe the big question is, what is the legacy of Battlestar Galactica? As I said before, it kind of set the stage for modern prestige TV in a lot of ways. But a lot of like the sci-fi sensibilities or that show's approach to sci-fi, I'm not sure if it's really carried forward into that much. At least we're not seeing that much.
No,
these days.
we had The Expanse, which is the closest thing nowadays, I think. But even that just ended. As far as like kind of like a harder, more gritty sci-fi world, I think The Expanse is the closest to a Battlestar Galactica that we have gotten in a long time.
Randy, did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share before we wrap up?
No, just that since Bandai doesn't really care about G-Saviour, it's super easy to find. So if you've never seen it, it's worth a watch. Seek it out, watch it, and just kind of be baffled by it. it's worth one watch.
Yeah.
For sure.
You can even find the DVD not too expensive. I think it's like $35-$40 or something. It's long out of print. Certainly not a highly valued release.
No.
It is around. I imagine you can still find the Gunpla around too.
It'll take a little digging, but you can find it. You can find it.
I'd love to see like the again, like I said, the behind the scenes stuff if that ever surfaces. I don't think we're ever going to see that pilot film, but it's okay to keep a little bit of a mystery on some things in life, especially something like this.
I had fun with this one, actually. I surprised more than I thought I would actually watching it.
Me too. I was really dreading going back and watching this again, especially since, things suck so much. I'm just like, oh man, the last thing I want to do is subject myself to this movie with everything going on in the world right now. But yeah, actually it was kind of fun. Takes you back in time to a time that is long gone. Randy, thanks for coming on the show again. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on the internet, on Twitter. That's where I do most of my thinkies and my talkies. That's at twitter.com/ChandyRan.
And thank you for tuning into Zannen Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zannencanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood, which you can find at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your podcast app of choice. See you again.